5, 6.
Good morning, everybody. We're just waiting for more people to join. So please welcome. So let's start in a few minutes. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. What's the weather like in Chicago?
Beautiful.
Yeah, we have one too here in New York.
It's 79 degrees.
Oh, that's great.
So you can all, everybody who joined, I think you can also see the participant number. So this is kind of a little game to play. We are looking at the participant number, and we'll start as soon as it stops and doesn't rise continuously anymore. In about 2-3 minutes.
I think we need some yoga music to start.
That would have been a good idea.
Wake-up calls for everyone. Put your work top on, wear your pajama bottoms, put on some music, and grab a cup of coffee. Meetings with no pants, right? Have you read that book?
No, I haven't read the book, but I'll tell you that I haven't been wearing long pants until I had to go into the school starting 3 weeks ago.
Or shoes, or shoes.
Yes. Okay, we have 49, we have 50 to start. Okay, we will start. Good morning, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to today's Career ID session, conversation with Judy Wert on the design frontiers and how to prepare for them. Thank you for joining us. A Career ID, as many of you know are on here, is our program here at the Institute of Design to help students building career competencies. So we define them as storytelling, that includes your resume, your portfolio, your narrative, networking, which is ever more important, particularly in time of COVID, interviewing, and negotiating. As part of Career ID, we have a career academy where we cover a topic every week at this early morning hour here in Chicago. And this one, we got a request from students to also have a discussion on where the design field is going. And who better than Judy Wert to join us for that. The timing of the call at 8 o'clock in the morning is so that we all can enjoy coffee. So Judy and I are enjoying our coffee hour, so it's a coffee chat. But the real reason is that we have a whole cohort of students in Asia that, because of the immigration challenges over the summer, were not able to join in time. So we want them to be full part of the community. So welcome to our participants from Asia, and happy hour. Wishing a good happy hour and cocktail hour over there. So we structured, Judy and I spent some time together, and we structured our conversation based on the questions you submitted. So thank you for submitting them. So we plan to spend a little bit more than half of the time on the conversation based on conglomeration of those questions. We also want to leave a lot of time at the end for your questions. So at that point of time, please start using the chat. We will then go through the chat questions. So let's start with some introduction. So I'm Denis Weil. I'm the Dean of the Institute of Design. Institute of Design is a unique design school in the sense that we are modeled professional schools.
He's super like chill for like 20 minutes, and then he's like,
yeah, Judy, we have a second person for you coming in.
I can't.
I don't know, someone's not on mute. They should be. Okay.
Okay. So we are modeled after professional schools like a business school or medical school or law school, and therefore are also quite active in research, as we have a PhD program, and I will have a chance to share some of that research as well. We are very excited about Judy joining us. Judy has been working with the leadership of innovative companies for over 25 years. She is a design practitioner by training and is a trusted authority in the world of design and business. And she has earned international reputation as a pivotal force in executive search. Judy was featured on the High Resolution Video Podcast and profiled by Fast Company in what companies really want in a designer. So who better than to talk to Judy? So with that, I hand over to Judy to talk a little bit what she's doing these days with her practice. Judy, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. I wish I could see everyone, but I'll try to imagine all your faces. So I am the co-founder of Wert&Co, and Wert&Co was launched in 1995. And our business was founded on the idea, back in 95, our tagline was where design was integral to business success. And we've stayed pretty true to that motto today. I don't think design was quite at the level of where it is today, which is a great statement for design. We are working on executive level search. We're working on board of directors searches. We're doing team building for organizations. We're getting involved in agency selection, helping companies find firms to develop projects, and we're in general consultation with organizations as well, just around staffing and hiring and profiling and organizational development. It's been, actually, we're in our 26th year now. And we did a count in terms of the organizations that we've interacted with. It's over 4,000 organizations, many portfolio reviews. By way of example, 819 Jennifers, and actually we're now at 130 conversations that we've had with people all over the world. That's a lot of conversations and a lot of information and stories. The kind of engagements that we work on, you can see from this slide, everything from chief design officer to professor of academia. We've worked across health, luxury, cultural museums, social impact, consumer products, hospitality, organizational learning, involved in diversity and inclusion, data, health. So we're really covering all disciplines. And it's great news that all these disciplines are looking for design. Here's a sampling of some of the clients that we've worked with over the years. And each have their own narrative and their own story and their own contribution to design and to business. You can also see these on our website, so I'll skip ahead. Some of the notable searches that we've worked on, everything from transitioning a cloud-based sharing to refining publishing on the web, to helping startups grow up, to actually putting a first female 4-star general of the United States Army on an established board of directors for a distributed workforce focused on design and publishing. So it's quite a range that we've been involved with, and many of these people we've known for over 25 years when they started their career, and now they're leading some of these very notable organizations. So
Great.
That's an intro to Wert&Co.
Great. Thank you, Judy. And it's really impressive, the list of, what I particularly like is the list of challenges and tasks that, which really shows kind of how design has, as you mentioned, really risen from kind of focus on producing to actually focus of leading and of strategy. So we have structured our conversation around 5 topics, and let's just give you quickly a head view. We're going to talk about the value proposition of design today, the roles as a result of that, how are the roles changing in the frontier, what are the industry shifts, what are the skills and experience that designers need today, and then we're ending with how to enter in the marketplace. So that's what we're covering in our conversation, and as I said, afterwards we'll open up for questions. So let's start with value proposition. And Judy, I wanted to start with some research. So what I'm bringing here in this conversation, I'm kind of the semi-academic, the pra-academic side. So I'll share some of the research we have done, which is by trying to codify practice. It's not that we're doing it in a lab, we're doing it by talking to a lot of practitioners and codifying it. But obviously, these are just interviews. Judy actually is brass tacks, where actually you have to place somebody. So we did a research from 60 years ago, together with Fortune magazine. So Jay Doblin, who was the director in the 50s, did a research on 100 best designed products, together with Fortune magazine, who published it in 1959. Fortune magazine approached us again in last year, and they wanted to run the study again, and we did. And what we did, the same methodology that Jay Doblin used, which is we asked 100 design leaders. It was business, academia, and he at the time also had architects. We replaced the architects with design influencers, and we asked them each to nominate 10 products. And we saw significant shifts, as you can imagine, in how the products were. So on this slide on the left, you see some of the products, the best design, greatest designs. Actually was called greatest products at the time. So we also changed it to make it broader than products to greatest designs. You see there are a lot of cars in there. It was also very interesting in the people who nominated, it was like 95% men. We went to obviously more 50-50 balance. But when we analyzed the products on the right, you see is 23andMe, WeChat, the Forever Map, IKEA bookshelf, and a nonprofit in Africa. So when we analyzed the list, that was how it shifted. We saw shifts in design value. And we saw clearly that the value shifted from just adding value, so mostly through aesthetics in the 59, to really driving value, defining the product, not just styling at the end, through focusing on new functionality. Second, I think one of the things is that we moved away from an object, from a noun, to actually a verb, and a verb in two senses, a verb in the design process, in the innovation process, but also in the verb in the sense of service design, to enable users, consumers, residents to actually do things differently versus just having an object. The products in 59 were very high end. It was very expensive luxury furniture or cars. What's great about design, very clearly, it has democratized. We had quite a few CPG, consumer packaged goods products that won greatest design, or IKEA. And then lastly, the shift from artifact to experience. So that's kind of how we have seen the value change based on that analysis. I'd love to hear from you, Judy, on what you think is the unique value organizations expect from design. Which are the outcomes that organizations expect design to lead and to deliver, or even to own or steward for the organization?
So when I opened up my computer this morning and I read a few of my emails, which is of course what we all do in the morning, there was a quote that arrived in my inbox at a perfect moment before this lecture. And I would just like to read this quote because I think it says very much how design is welcomed into industry now. At its core, what we do is rooted in humanity and emotional intelligence. Now more than ever, people are seeking more transformative and soul-enriching experiences. That means bringing the right people at the seat at the table. And I think, in a way, that says where design has come to and how organizations are embracing design in organizations to make meaningful change. It reminds me when we began a search not too long ago, and it was an SVP for design for a media company. And at the onset of the search, I said, why are you hiring this person? Why do you need this person? Not want, but need this person. And the response from the client was, we need to create an enduring and delightful experience. And I think design needs to play a role in organizations where they're creating usable, scalable, beautiful products and services and creating for the consumer. So this is about understanding how people feel, crafting the right questions and framework, strategizing the portfolio, and helping to establish a true design culture from the top down, and most importantly, in some way, helping to create memories for their consumer. And I think that's at a very high level what organizations are looking for, and linking design ultimately to the business health.
Judy, and one follow-up question, something that we are seeing and kind of little bit worried about. One is the overtaking of digital transformation and kind of design moving onto digital or interactive in many consulting firms for sure, but perhaps also on the client, on the company side. And second, in the US particularly, you described a lot about experiences and service. The real service design has not really caught on. I think people put everything on the UX, and in Europe and Asia, service design is much more recognized as being actually not just about the experience, but also recognizing that you need to design the operations aspect behind it to provide that experience. And if you just focus on digital and UX, you're not going to get there. Do you have any insights on, is that difference between US and Europe? Do we see that correctly? And is there anything we can do to kind of shift that, or do you see a shift in that?
I think different companies are using design differently. I do think when the digital explosion began, the focus on UX and information architecture and the interface was, you know, where the industry began. In our experience, and maybe because we're working at the leadership level, we're seeing that companies are valuing the service. We are getting searches that are asking for people to lead not just the interface, but actually the end-to-end, that they're thinking about business and functionality. If you think about more and more organizations, I mean, think about organizations in slightly different ways. You've got organizations that are competing on functionality, right? That's like the Googles and the LinkedIn. That's very much about UX, UI. You think about companies competing on business value. That's like Amazon, Microsoft. It's about great value. It's about great deals. It's about price, service. So maybe it's a little, there is still more of that UX piece. But if you think about companies competing on design, where they're embracing the end-to-end, you know, the value chain is understood. It's superior design that matters. It's high risk, high reward. I think, you know, when you think about even Apple back in the day, when Apple was bankrupt, they couldn't just compete on operational efficiency. So they had to think about design end to end and anticipate customer needs. So I believe design, I'm not sure I see that in quite the same way, at least from our experience, at least the companies that are coming to us. But not everyone's caught on yet, right? Like we do sometimes get inquiries. We'd like a UX leader. And we tend to gravitate where the company has elevated beyond the UX. But I think that is a starting point for many, and because the digital explosion has happened.
And then just to finish on this topic, would you therefore recommend to our students graduating to still continue to use more like experience designer rather than service designer? Because in Europe, everybody's a service designer. So, but for their resume, is in US, it's still better to talk about experience design and architect versus service designer?
Experience design is really inclusive of service design.
Yeah, okay, great. So then let's shift to roles, which obviously derives right of the value proposition. So let me start again with another piece of research we just did last year as well. We did a syndicated research with 6 of our corporate partners, Salesforce, Google, Philips, Ford, Weil and Wert, to really think about, now that the value business is wanting design, believes in the value of design. We had many of our partners are leading big design groups in those organizations. They wanted to know, how do we now best maximize the resources to deliver have the biggest impact. So this was again in-depth research based with 50 people. And one of the things we started with is to kind of be more future oriented, to design frontiers. And we're building off this shift, I think that you alluded to actually in your initial quote, Judy, this shift to businesses that are led with purpose. So the purpose-driven movement, multi-stakeholder capitalism, if you want, focus on sustainability, social equity, as well as community engagement. Thinking that the role of design can play in that. And our conclusion was that design should, and is probably uniquely qualified to play a leading role in that. So the same way that finance is the steward of the financial balance sheet of an organizations, we as a group of those us with the 6 people, were aspiring that designers could actually be the steward of the purpose balance sheet. How well are you actually living on the purpose? And when we went in more depth, we interviewed both designers in organizations and people who work with designs. We realized, as you mentioned in your opening, that designers nowadays work across all levels and they have different roles at each level. So you have the executive, the chief design officer or executive design officer, which is really about the vision partner for the executive team and leads that part, visualizing it. Then you have kind of at the business unit level or division level, you have the vision interpreter. That's kind of more of a design strategist within a division to assign how do we best use the resources, where do we allocate them, what are the priorities. And then you have at the project level, the action aligner, which is exactly the bringing people together that you mentioned in your quote as well. We see that in many organizations now, designer plays kind of a parallel role to a project manager, not to manage the project, but to keep the project on track, to make sure that the project actually delivers on the original vision, and to help making things tangible, therefore get the team excited and focused on the same vision. Because very often, you have these teams where everybody in the team has actually different visions. So to get this aligning around this is really the North Star that we want to go to. And with the strong feeling, particularly in our colleagues in the tech world, that that would help with the issue of unintended consequences. It would help with the issue that what actually gets delivered, the effect, is actually quite a gap to the original intent. And then that action aligner could play that role. And then obviously the traditional role of producer or maker. How do you see the roles for design changing in organizations? And what are the new emerging roles and what are the shrinking ones? And do you think, one of the questions we got quite a few from our audience is this whole issue of design doing versus design thinking, and ID graduates being more on the having the doing from the undergraduate side, but really learning the strategy, research, and the thinking part. Do you think that ID graduates are good for those new roles, or do they need to kind of shift and are not rightly prepared for those roles?
So let me start off by saying the requirements that are coming to us as a starting point, what our clients and what I think organizations are demanding more and more from all designers, whatever you want to call it, design thinking, experience design, they're looking for people who have craft fluency, who have content fluency, that have business fluency, and that have technology fluency. They're orthogonal thinkers and they're connectors. If you elevate that even further, I would ask each and everyone who's sitting in here to start to think of themselves in sort of different categories. Back in, I think it was 2008, Kevin McCullough from The Plan, he runs a design firm in the UK. He talked about 4 different types of designers. I don't know if you read that, Dennis, or are aware of this, but it's interesting. So you have the maestro, which is sort of like a Johnny Ive. You have a visionary, who's like a Larry Keeley, which we all know. The manager, who's the action aligner, the maker, the translator. You have the entrepreneur, who's like the late Terence Conran, and you have the ambassador, which is like the Tim Brown. And I think start to think of yourselves first in that way versus I am functionally a UX designer or I'm functionally a product designer. I think it's really important to know who you are when you're going into these organizations. You know, are you a provocateur or are you a responder? Are you an integrator or are you a facilitator? Or you just want to be a quiet player in the background, which we often refer to as a high level, an individual contributor. So I think that's at a high level. I don't know if that's answering your question, so I think I'm going to go now to answering directly your question. I always like to take it one level above. We're getting, you know, I think the different roles that you play from ID, you're going to be a design researcher potentially because you've got that intellectual rigor, and I think you're bringing insights and knowledge into the process. You're going to be a capability builder. So you're going to be building very specifically innovation strategies. You're going to be a systems designer, whether it's for data or voice or, you know, the new emerging trends that are coming out given the world of bots. You're going to be involved in design training and education. This is where I think the ID student population, as I know it, will play a significant role in design.
And do you think, so I love, by the way, both how you framed both of it, it's really very, very helpful. Two questions on the very high level one, the provocateurs, the innovators, the ambassador. Do you see a growth in one of them, a higher demand? So more like where the demand is? Is the demand shifting, or is it demand that they need to be able to play multiple roles for somebody comes in? And the second, just corollary to that, those skills you just designed that ID designers can bring, do you see this on the going up or going down in the demand or in the relevance for industry?
I think every organization needs every one of these profiles. So to your point, there aren't that many maestros. You know, how many Jonathan Ives and Larry Keeleys are there? Like, I think that those are very, you know, hard to achieve statuses. I think most ID students and most people are going to be in the manager level or the manager leader, whatever you want to call it, where they're going to be helping to set the vision from a maestro's, you know, brain and action align all those, action align what's necessary to build design. I think design, the ID profiles, I think we need strategy. We need thinkers. It's sort of the ID is like the new McKinsey, right? These are people who are coming in with deep thought and intellectual rigor and process and understanding of the consumer insight. They're just bringing a different approach to unlocking the possibilities. So the ID student is incredibly valuable. They may not be making it the most beautiful experience, but they're going to make it usable and enduring.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so we have one question, if you can share the articles, so we'll follow up on that, on the Design Master, Ambassador, Manager, if there is an article, so we'll follow up on that. Okay, and we now are going, so basically we've talked about the value, we have taken about the different roles and how they're shifting. Now, let's talk about industries. Design is known, I think the fortune, actually let me stop sharing right now so the audience can see us, the two of us better. We have seen obviously in this shift of the 100 greatest designs, quite a bit an industry shift as well. Before it was just like furniture and cars and things like that. So obviously we always see an industry shift. We see the way we watch at industry shifts is our placement data of our students. And what we have seen significant shifts over the last 2 years. So we have seen shifts, we see shifts every, I think, in a 3-year cycle. So let's go 5 years ago. We suddenly saw obviously the shifts away from design firms because they didn't exist anymore to more consulting firms that have acquired the design firms. And so the shift became more innovation consultant roles, working for, and quite a bit of digital, working for all the big consulting firms, McKinsey, BCG, Accenture, EY. And that is still going strong, but it's not as extreme as it is. What we've seen in the last 2 years suddenly is a real growth and shift into healthcare on both sides, on the insurance side as well as the hospital, the provider side. Mobility, huge, driven very much by 1 or 2 companies, i.e. Ford and Uber, and food. So particularly those new food innovation centers. So that what we see in our placement area. And obviously what we also see is a shift towards civic design in government, and some nonprofits, although it's more government positions, or consulting firms like Booz Allen and Deloitte that work on government. So if you combine the two, we are probably about 10% to 15% now of our graduates going into civic. So those are the shifts we see. I would love to see what do you see as the greatest change in the landscape, and how the questions we got from the audience is, how is that shift perhaps driven from emerging technologies or increasing demand of purpose, multi-stakeholder approach that we talked about earlier? And then what are the sectors and organizations that you see coming more into high demand?
So I'm going to avoid purposely places like Google, Facebook, Twitter, because
they're insatiable from a need for talent, or?
They are eating up the talent, actually. In fast, it's an unbelievable amount of people joining those companies. I'm not, and it's impacted the design community tremendously. I'm not sure how, well, it might be a separate conversation, one-on-one, to talk about how I feel about that, but I think that that's for another day. I do think it's a reality, and I do think these companies, ultimately their goal, as we know it, is about, social. And I think that there's a level of, a lack of integrity to some of what the designers are doing in these organizations. Not all aspects of the organizations, but I do think designers are not being utilized to their best of their ability and to what they can really bring to the table. People are looking for hyper-personalized experiences, and they're looking for collaboration, and they're looking for workplace tool. And I think where we're starting to see companies really coming into play is around education, retooling education, especially since COVID. There is a ton of work being done around this area. It's a complex area. It's an important area. It's setting the stage for the future generations. And I invite many people who are excited by really tough challenges. And many of you might be parents at home schooling your kids right now. You know the flaws of the educational system, given the emerging remote. I think data science is a really huge area, and the importance of data and privacy from an ethical perspective. I think design thinkers, we need you there. We need you to be helping us to think about data in a good way. Like you said, finance is a huge area. Therapeutics and health technology has been rampant lately for obvious reasons. I mean, it was already a trend before COVID, but I think the amount of inquiry that's come to us just in that space alone has been tremendous. Corporate social responsibility, that's another area that I think design thinkers, that's a very complex area, and I think those companies need you. I think they need you more than a Facebook needs you. We don't need to figure out how to push another button and figure out what the next emoticon is. We need design thinkers. We need you from ID to go into these spaces that are truly needing, someone to make enduring, meaningful experiences. Transportation is another one. I would say urban development, developing cities. Cities are being redesigned now, with the car and the traffic and the climate change being another huge area. There are plenty of opportunities to start to seek out those companies and try to find your foot in the door instead of going in line and waiting to see if you can get into Facebook or Google or Twitter.
Great. And how
and sorry for anybody who's at Google or Facebook. There's good things happening at those companies, but there's so many other areas that design. I guess you have to decide what you value. Do you value purpose? Do you value money? Do you value impact? You have to decide that when you're going out into the marketplace. But if you really want impact and you're willing to, in short, maybe take a slightly less paycheck, these are areas need you.
Fully agree. And we have quite, over the last 3 years, have realized both and added to our curriculum and to our faculty a clear focus on design and data and how John Kane, who is our visiting professor, frames it, how to combine economic value with human values, and through technology, through data, computer. I think that is fully agree. And then the second one is the whole urban side and civic side, where obviously how you do design, it's much more community driven, and it goes beyond participatory design to actually a designer shifting from having to give up authorship. It's a cultural shift for design. I would love to know what you think about that. So we think with that shift to purpose-driven, multi-stakeholder, and all the way you opened your quote this morning, to be that kind of designer is actually a little bit of a culture stress or pressure, friction with the traditional culture of design as designer, as authors. Many of us go into design because of authors using our creativity to author new things, and the role more and more in this multi-stakeholder or as action aligner is very often more of a facilitator, of a steward, and kind of you have to, we describe it as two key shifts. One is you have to give up this role of author and kind of reveal and being cool. And the second, you have to actually get your hands dirty and roll up your sleeves. You can't just stop at, voila, here's my wonderful product. Isn't it beautiful, a la Maestro? And then see, you go and figure out how to design it. So then I think what we nowadays need to design is more interventions rather than solutions. And interventions, by definition, you need to stay with them because the system is going to change them. So the question we have from the audience is human resources or the future of work. How do you, are these kind of, or let's talk generally about what's on the horizon. If you want to have somebody who is really wants to be at the frontier, what do you think as the newest areas that are coming up? Is the future of work or human resources an area that you think design can play, and are there other ones?
You mean as in workplace design?
Yes.
100%. I mean, I think how people are going to show up at work, how people are going to work remotely, how people are going to participate in communities within their workplace, it's uncharted territory. Organizations that said that they would never be remote are now remote, and they're learning new ways for people to work together. They're going to learn new ways of interacting, when to be together, when you don't need to be together. So I think that's a huge area. And I think you mentioned human resources is another huge area. I mean, think of me, I started my career as a design practitioner, and look what I'm doing today. Now I'm designing organizations through people, right? And I think even the human resource departments need design thinkers in their organization to help them think about how to bring in the right people in the right way. This is systems thinking. And I don't think, I think this is much an opportunity for a designer as it is to make something beautiful, because you're making a workplace beautiful. So whatever can be beautiful as an experience is where design will play. It's no longer we need a design extraordinaire, a solo visionary. I just don't think that exists anymore. I think organizations are too complex. Business is too complex, and we need people who are going to play together. If I were to say the one area that is so important for designers right now is to be a facilitator and a storyteller. You need to be able to help frame and shape the value of design, and you need to be able to communicate that. I suggest to everyone I speak to who's a design leader, go take an improvisational class. Learn how to be in the room and bridge together every discipline that exists to build up an organization.
Great. As expected, the conversation is going so well that we're getting into time challenges. So let's move to the second last one, which is skills and experience. And that one, I think we can just leave it at, I'll make a point and then perhaps you can make a point. So we at ID are believing that IDEO framed the term that designers need to be T-shaped. So have one very deep expertise, but also need obviously know languages of other fields like business and technology. I think that John Maeda and also many of our industry partners say that's not sufficient anymore. It now needs to be the Greek letter phi. You need to have two things you're strong with. John Maeda claims it's either design of business or design of technology, and then you still have letter P still has the horizontal one, which is still a broad knowledge. First of all, do you agree with that? And second, what do you see as the elements that could be the strengths? So is it broader than just design, technology, or business? Are there other fields that you can combine with design that would be a skill for the future?
I agree with John on many things. And I do not believe you can come in just with one strong strength and just a generalization of multiple strengths. I think you need to come in with a combination of, say, business and craft. You need to come in with content and craft. You need to come in with technology and content. I think companies are looking for people who are orthogonal, you know, in their approach, and you can't just focus on one thing. It's funny. I was looking at, and I don't know if this answers your question directly, but again, to go at a little higher level, when I think about people who I represented and where they've began, and I'm skipping a little bit to the paths, you know, the entryway into the marketplace. And I'm going to tell you 4 quick profiles, and they're all designers, but they're coming from different places. So if you think of candidate A, this person began in politics. Then they became a producer of media. Then they designed a business that built an award-winning product that showed up in the Apple Store as the #1. And now they're going into a media company as a VP, a head of design. So this is somebody who's bridged political orientation with media, with business and design. And these are the people that are making up the future leadership. That's one example. The second is an architect. This was a classic architect by training. Then they became a manager. Then they built on their business acumen and became a managing director for global all across Asia. And then they became a SVP of consumer experience for a travel hospitality company. Again, architecture, merging business, merging content, merging not only space, but artifact. You've got someone like John Maeda, for instance. He began in computer design, moved into the VC world, then moved into leading a global distributed workforce, then into advertising and experience officer. And as of yesterday, we just learned he's moving into enterprise software. So you can see the breadth of these individuals, and it represents how much is needed to participate as a designer in industry.
And I think that's a great segue into entering the marketplace. We have one follow-up question live, which is, if somebody wants to be kind of ultimately the executive vision partner or that high-level design leader, how should they prepare for the role, and where should they start? I know you just gave the bridge thing, but say we have 60 graduates entering the marketplace this year in spring and fall. And they have to choose kind of in different pathways. Should they go in innovation consulting? Should they go into design delivery? Should they go into research strategy? Should they go in UX? And also, which domain should they go in? I'm sure there's many starting points, but perhaps instead of giving a starting point, what's the decision criteria? How should they make that decision on where to start on this bridging, realizing that they're going to do multiple different things?
Yeah. Well, let's start off by saying finding a job is emotional, it's difficult, and it is, you'll have triumphs and traumas along this journey. And your first job is not your last job. As you can see by these examples that I just gave, you know, who knew that when they began in politics, they would now be an SVP head of design. So I think what I ask people from the very beginning when I speak to individuals and companies for that matter, what do you care about? Think about what you care about and think about what you value. Do you care about the people that you're working with? Pick an organization, I don't care if it's a consultancy or a technology company, where you're going to have a great leader or a mentor, where you're going to be able to apprentice with that person. You're going to be able to study them. You're going to learn from them. That first job it's just a stepping stool, into what's next. I don't think you should go and have to figure out everything in that first job. That first job is only a first job. So you can go in, pick an opportunity based on a content area that you like. Go through LinkedIn and type in the words job and design and start to read through all those postings and see what speaks to you and go after that. And then go to those companies, look to see who your network is, look to see where the alumni are. And that's going to be your first job. I don't think you have to worry that your first job is going to set the stage for whatever you're going to do to come.
Great, thank you. So now I'm shifting over to all the questions, and please add more. So we have two very interesting ones, very different end of the spectrum. We have one from international students, designers, who the question is, any advice for international designers who get affected more often than not by pay discrepancy, and also bring the baggage of visa sponsoring? So any tips on how they can overcome those two barriers and challenges?
The visa sponsorship is tricky depending on where you want to live. I don't think America is a place right now that we are seeing a lot of visa sponsorships happen for obvious reasons. The political landscape is very challenging. What was the other point?
Pay discrepancy. Pay discrepancy for international students.
I mean, I think locale matters, right? You know, if you're living in a big city versus a smaller town or a smaller country, there's going to be pay differences. I do think there's going to be a shift where it's equal pay everywhere given this COVID outbreak, and companies are going to have to normalize because people are leaving these big cities and they're moving to smaller destinations. You know, there's a fleeing going on. So I think we're going to see a balancing of the compensation discrepancies as time moves on.
And then on the other spectrum, we obviously invited our alumni to join the call as well, and we have quite a few. And one of them is asking, how might ID alumni who have significant experience approach a career change? i.e., how does one seek out companies who want design innovation beyond just getting a foot in the door? How do you find those? How can you find those places? And how should you approach a career change to become one of those bridge examples? How can you enable that?
You need to be doing a lot of networking and reading and attending the different conferences to see who you can connect with. You be bold, reach out to these people, especially if you have a network of individuals that are at some of these other companies. Reach out, be courageous. It's not going to just come to you anymore. People are inundated with inquiry and requests. You need to be architecting your own future and thinking of yourself as your own headhunter for that matter. And I think networking is probably the most valuable skill that you can build and develop to try to figure out where you go next. And it's possible.
So we have two related questions, both timely and partially politics of the time. One question is, a lot of the areas you have mentioned where designers could go are public serving and politically left-leaning. Can you talk about how politics are playing where the field of design is going? Any barriers, opportunities given this tumultuous environment? And the second question, which I will take a cut at it as well, is can we talk about different ways design can be used to fight anti-Black racism? So why do we start with the political environment, the left-leaning one, and then I'll start with the anti-Black racism, and we can build on each other.
I'm rarely speechless, but I'm not sure how I would answer the politics question. I really am not sure right now.
But do you think that designers, so like in the 50s when the anti-communism thing was, all the Hollywood creatives were kind of grouped into that, being part of the. Do you think this is happening to design? That design is perceived to be a left field, or have you not encountered any of that at this stage?
No, I haven't encountered that yet. I see designers. No, I haven't encountered that yet.
Okay. So on the fight anti-Black racism, obviously I don't know if it's Terence. Oh, hi Terence. So we at ID have, thanks to our faculty member, led by a faculty member, Chris Rudd, who's been with us 2.5 years, 3 years. He's focusing very much on anti-racist design and has brought that practice to ID. I won't do it fully justice, but let me start with thinking that design can add a huge value. The reason we got into a lot of this community-driven design to drive equity is actually came partially from a conversation I had with Theaster Gates. And Theaster Gates was saying that in the past, community organizers were about opposing things. You protected your neighborhood, your community from something bad coming into your neighborhood. Today, and if you look at his practice, it's very much about building something, getting the community together to build something. And that, to me, I took away that actually designers, or I think more importantly, the practice of design, the tools, the mindset and approach, actually is a new role of community organizing. And I think that's the way Chris practices design. So the way he defines 3 main definitions for anti-racist, to deliver anti-racist design. So the way I describe that, the difference between anti-racist and inclusive design to me is that inclusive design is about removing barriers that get created by the system, and they get created again and again and again, and then you have to kind of remove the barriers. I think anti-racist design is to change the system, structural change the system, so those barriers don't even get created in the first place. And the way Chris talks about is that first of all, you have to define what is racist about the design so that you can figure out what that is. Mm-hmm. Second, you need to have a conversation on how could you design in a way that does not ideate with the community on how could it be differently, and then you need to start obviously implementing it. So that's I think the role of design that we have talked, both Judy and I have talked a lot about, of this facilitator of bringing stakeholders together. I think it can be a powerful tool, I believe, in driving these systemic changes. So I don't know, Judy, if you have some thoughts on that as well.
You know, I'm a new student to this area of design, and it's just coming into our orbit. So I don't want to pretend to be an expert on this area. I would actually love to speak with Terence about this and learn more. But what I can say, in one particular case, we have a role with a company where they are starting to build someone very specifically within their design group that is thinking about how every single product and experience, this person is owning that discipline and is coming into every single meeting and will be the voice of protecting anti-racism. So I think these roles will emerge within organizations. They have to. Businesses have to have a voice, a facilitator, a leader, an instigator, a provocateur to take care of this real problem. But Terence, I look forward to speaking with you about this.
So we have 6 minutes left. We have a few more questions. So we have one from Ayesha Akhtar. Thank you. The example of transitioning from career in architecture. I have a background in architecture and now transitioning into product design UX. I'm also a new mom to 2 young kids. Judy, can you talk a bit about the future of career and design for women balancing family life?
It's hard. I think companies, especially now, again with COVID, I think COVID has really sort of disrupted innovation on all levels. I think people are learning what it's like to be home and taking care of your kids. It's not just the mother, it's the father. It's the grandmother that's living in the house too because of, families taking care of their grandparents. I do think that it's more, I would remove the mother piece and say this is about human beings taking care of other human beings while figuring out how to work and excel in the industry. Companies are going to be adopting their policy, they're going to be changing their policies to take into consideration these realities that have emerged as super important.
One more question we have, which is we've talked a lot about design moving into urban, civic, government, into social sectors. One question is how, if you want to go there, how do you best start if you can't, because there aren't that many, there are jobs, as I said, we see it about 15% of our people get placed. But if you wanted to work towards that, what are other ways to, should you focus on service design? Should you focus on innovation consulting? Or what's another way? When you place people, what kind of background are they looking for in the social or civic space? Experiences I'm looking.
People who care about the mission, people who are bring a lot of human empathy to the conversation because it is about people, and content leaders. So I think you can come from, those organizations need every discipline to make up the possibilities for what that organization can address. So I think that's a longer conversation of what exactly they need to go in, but there's room for everyone in those organizations, from design thinkers to politicians to educators to facilitators.
Yeah, and I would say the same, having been in civic design myself. I think there is a mixture of, I think it's a mixture of innovation best practices, so organizational design. How do you actually build a culture of innovation? What kind of capabilities do you need to build? And then the second one, I think, is service design, because obviously mostly what government does is about services.
Service people, yeah.
Yeah, so I think those two things are both very helpful for the background. I also think obviously the scale is so huge, particularly if you go into the civic space, that having grounding in systems, thinking in systems design, which our students have, but is another key thing that is crucial in order to be effective. And then lastly is definitely don't be a design master. I mean, design master is not going to work in that environment. You need to be more of that aligner, facilitator personality, and passion. Have the passion for that.
And a student of culture, like really understand. I do think more and more, many of our searches are, not that we all have the luxury of travel, especially right now, but I think being able to study different cultures and the way cultures work and communicate, there's a lot to be learned that can be taken. So take a culture, take an international class, make sure to be intentional about learning what different communities are doing, that will build in, I think consumer insight, consumer research is a huge area of opportunity as well.
And we have one last question, which is a build on the previous one, which I think is really interesting, relevant this time. How can you negotiate a part-time role so that you can be a parent? But that's the question that I would add to that. I advise our graduates right now, perhaps you can also see if I'm right there or not, to, in the current COVID time, to not necessarily find a long-term job, but to be open to actually take on a project, so that they are practicing. And I think it might be, there are more things, more projects or part-time or contract work out there than there are full-time job, because it builds your resume, it builds the experience, and you make a salary. But this idea of part-time or temporary, how does that fit into a design career in general? How do you get that? And also particularly now in COVID times.
I'm an advocate of any kind of work, right? I'm an advocate of learning, right? So if you're going to be able to learn in a part-time way because you have other family obligations, then that's what you need to do. Some organizations will welcome that more and more now. Other organizations will require a full-time commitment. It's hard to know, it's hard to predict, like in 2 years from now, the outcome of what we're experiencing today. But if you want it, reach for it and make a case for it and tell your story in a meaningful way, show your passion for the company and what they're doing. And I believe there are people if you connect in the right way, that will welcome that as an opportunity. And if that's your reality, that's your reality.
Wonderful. A great ending. It's 9 o'clock. I hope you have all enjoyed the coffee or cocktail hour with Judy and Denis. Thank you, Judy. It's really insightful. I think we should, if you're open for it, we should do this an annual event, because I think it's so helpful. I think for students to really see, get the practice view that you have, and the very high level strategic practice view that fits kind of with our focus. And I enjoyed talking to you for an hour. So if you do the same, we should.
Can we do it a slightly an hour later next time? No, I'm kidding.
Yes, hopefully if we're all here, we can do that.
And to all of you that are listening, thank you for spending the morning with us. And if there are additional questions that I haven't addressed or you'd like to reach out, you can reach me at Judy, Judy, at Wert&Co, Wertco.com.
Thank you, everybody, and have a great day, good evening.
Good night. Good morning.
Bye.
Bye-bye.